Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into one of the most shocking and game-changing developments in the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war. Moscow's so-called Crimea Land Bridge, the strategic lifeline connecting mainland Russia to occupied Crimea, is gone, destroyed, and as the last bits of asphalt crumble under the weight of defeat, chaos is spreading fast across southern Ukraine. Russian troops are fleeing, fuel depots are burning, and what was once a symbol of Russian dominance is now becoming a graveyard of lost ambitions. For months, the land bridge was everything to Russia. It wasn't just a route. It was the artery that kept their war machine alive in Crimea. Through it, Russia sent fuel, ammunition, food, and reinforcements. It was their main supply line, the only real connection between Russia's mainland and the territories they occupied in the south. But now, that connection is gone. Ukraine has struck it hard, repeatedly, and effectively. The destruction of this route has cut the Russian military in half, trapping thousands of soldiers on the Crimean side with nowhere to go and nothing left to fight with. Imagine the panic spreading through Russian ranks right now. Long lines of military trucks stretching for kilometers, tanks abandoned, soldiers walking on foot under the scorching southern sun. The fuel's gone, the trucks can't move, the convoys have stopped. What was once a highway of steel and fire has become a wasteland of silence. And the fear gripping those soldiers, it's not just fear of the enemy. It's fear of being forgotten, left behind by their own command. Ukraine's strikes on the land bridge didn't happen overnight. This was a calculated campaign, months in the making. Kyiv's forces used precision, guided missiles, drones, and sabotage units to target key sections of the corridor. Bridges, railway lines, and fuel depots were hit one after another. Each strike was like a cut to the artery, slowly draining the life from Russia's logistics. And now, the patient Russia's southern front is bleeding out. But to really understand the significance of this, we have to go back to why this land bridge mattered so much to Moscow. When Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, one of their main goals was to seize control of the southern coast, from Donetsk all the way to Crimea. They wanted to create a continuous strip of land that would connect Crimea directly to Russia. That was the so-called Crimea Land Bridge. It was supposed to be permanent proof that Crimea was now part of Russia forever. In propaganda videos, Russian state TV called it the Corridor of Victory. They showed soldiers smiling, convoys moving, and flags waving. But today, those same convoys are burning, and the corridor has turned into a corridor of retreat. The illusion of control is gone, and the psychological blow to the Kremlin is enormous. Now, let's talk about the human cost. Reports are coming in that thousands of Russian troops are trapped with no fuel, no supplies, and very limited communication. Soldiers are reportedly stealing civilian vehicles to escape. Some are even surrendering to Ukrainian forces just to survive. Ukrainian drones are hunting down convoys trying to flee. It's chaos on a scale the Russian command didn't anticipate. For Russian civilians in occupied Crimea, the situation is even worse. Panic is spreading through towns and cities. Long lines at gas stations, people hoarding food, and the once confident Russian settlers who moved to Crimea thinking they were there for good are now desperately trying to find a way out. The roads north are cut off, the ferries are overloaded, and the Crimean bridge, the Kerch Bridge, has been hit again and again, making it unsafe for travel. The isolation is complete. Kyiv's message is clear. Crimea is no longer untouchable. Ukraine has turned the tide. Every successful strike on that land bridge is a reminder to Russia that its empire is crumbling from the inside. The symbolic power of Crimea, the crown jewel of Putin's legacy, is now turning into a liability. And Moscow knows it. Inside the Kremlin, panic is spreading quietly. They won't say it on state TV, but they can't hide it anymore. Military bloggers, the so-called Z patriots, are furious. They're openly blaming the generals for the collapse. Some are even questioning Putin's leadership. They say the government lied about the situation for weeks, claiming everything was under control when in reality, the Southern Front was falling apart. That anger is dangerous for the Kremlin because it's coming from inside their own support base. Meanwhile, Ukrainian morale is at its highest point in months. The destruction of the land bridge is being celebrated as a monumental achievement. It's not just about territory, it's about showing that Russian power can be broken. Ukrainian soldiers are calling it the beginning of the end for Crimea, but there's another layer to this story. The destruction of the land bridge doesn't just affect soldiers. It's also a major blow to Russia's economy and logistics. Fuel and food shortages are hitting occupied regions hard. Supply routes that once carried hundreds of tons of materials daily are now gone. Russia is scrambling to use ferries across the Azov Sea, but it's nowhere near enough. Every extra kilometer of transport means more fuel, more cost, and more vulnerability to Ukrainian attacks. And then there's the psychological effect on the Russian public. For years, they've been told that Crimea is Russian forever. They were told it was safe, secure, and beyond the reach of war. But now, images of burning fuel convoys and collapsing bridges are flooding social media. Despite government censorship, Russians are starting to ask, if the army can't even protect the route to Crimea, how can it protect Crimea itself? The ripple effect of this loss is spreading fast. Russian command posts in Melitopol and Mariupol are being evacuated. Troops are moving back toward the east, abandoning positions they spent months fortifying. Ukraine's counteroffensive, once criticized for moving slowly, is suddenly gaining ground without even needing massive troop movements. The collapse of the land bridge has done what months of artillery couldn't. It's broken the backbone of Russian logistics. Satellite images show dozens of destroyed vehicles, craters along the supply routes, and columns of smoke rising from burned-out fuel depots. Analysts are calling it one of the most significant tactical victories of the war. But beyond the tactics, this event carries deep symbolism. The destruction of the land bridge isn't just about cutting a road. It's about cutting a story, the story Moscow built about control, power, and inevitability. Every empire in history has its moment when pride turns to panic. For Russia, this might be that moment. The soldiers running out of fuel on the roads to Crimea aren't just fighting a war. They're living the collapse of an illusion. They were told they were liberators. Now they're just survivors, stranded and scared. As the days go by, Ukrainian forces are pushing harder, targeting what remains of Russian logistics in the south. They're not just attacking positions. They're attacking the very ability of Russia to sustain its occupation. And once that's gone, the troops in Crimea will be isolated, surrounded, starved, and forced to make impossible choices. Some Russian analysts are already warning that Crimea could become the next Kherson, a forced retreat disguised as a strategic repositioning. But the difference this time is massive. Crimea isn't just a city. It's the jewel of Russia's imperial pride. Losing it would be the ultimate humiliation, the end of the story Putin has spent decades building. And that's why this moment matters so much. The land bridge was supposed to make Crimea untouchable. Now its destruction makes Crimea vulnerable. It exposes the weakness behind Moscow's show of strength. It shows the world that even the mightiest military power can crumble when faced with determination, strategy, and precision. In the bigger picture, this event reshapes the entire war. Without the land bridge, Russia has to reroute supplies through the Kerch Bridge or by sea, both risky and limited. Ukraine can now target those alternative routes more easily. Every strike from now on will hit harder, cut deeper, and bring the end closer. Internationally, this has sent shockwaves through Russia's allies and adversaries alike. Western analysts are calling it a turning point. Even in Moscow's partner capitals, there's growing concern about how unstable the Russian military situation has become. China, India, and others are watching closely, wondering if Moscow's strength is more fragile than it seems. Inside Russia, the propaganda machine is scrambling to spin the story. They're calling it a temporary disruption, but no one's buying it. Not when fuel lines in Crimea are dry. Not when soldiers are walking miles to find working vehicles. And not when civilians are trying to flee the peninsula in panic. Reality is bleeding through the cracks of censorship. For Ukrainians, this is not just a military success. It's a symbol of resilience. For years, they've been told they couldn't take back Crimea, that it was impossible, but now the impossible looks inevitable. Each explosion on the land bridge echoes a promise that Crimea will be free again. And as the smoke rises over the southern coast, the world watches in awe. The bridge that symbolized conquest has become the sign of collapse. The same steel and concrete that once carried Russian tanks now lies twisted and broken, a monument to arrogance and defeat. In the end, wars aren't just fought with weapons. They're fought with will, and right now, Ukraine's will is stronger. The destruction of Moscow's land bridge to Crimea is more than a victory on a map. It's a declaration that the tide has turned, that the age of occupation is ending, that even the mightiest can fall. Somewhere tonight, a Russian soldier sits beside an empty truck, staring at the dark road ahead, wondering how it all went so wrong. He's far from home, out of fuel and out of faith. And in that silence, between the echoes of distant drones and the smell of burning fuel, lies the truth that this war, like every empire before it, is collapsing under its own weight. The world will remember this moment, not just as the day the land bridge was destroyed, but as the day Moscow's illusion of control began to vanish. Crimea, once the symbol of conquest, is now the symbol of resistance. And as Ukraine advances, the message is clear. The bridge is gone, but hope remains. The road to Crimea no longer belongs to Russia. It belongs to history. And history, as always, has chosen the side of those who refuse to surrender. This is more than the end of a bridge. It's the end of an era, the fall of a lie, and the rise of a truth that can no longer be buried beneath propaganda or fear. The land bridge is gone, the empire is trembling, and the world is witnessing a turning point, one that will echo for generations to come. Because when the fuel runs out, when the soldiers flee, and when the bridges fall, what remains is not power, but purpose. And that, in the end, is what will decide who wins. Thank you for watching. Stay strong, stay aware, and as always, the story continues.